Hi all, and welcome to another starter guide for Dune Awakening. In this video, we are talking about resources you'll find in the starter and early game areas, namely Haga Basin South and Vermilius Gap. Before we get started, please keep in mind that this video is based on a preview build and that some content shown here might still change or be tweaked. Now, let's cover the very basics first, and that are plant fiber, granite and salvaged metal. These will be the first resources you start gathering when entering the game, and they are required to craft essentials like simple armor, weapons and tools that you need to progress. All three of these resources can be found anywhere in Haga Basin South, and since they are basic crafting materials, also anywhere else on the map, even in the far north. Fiber and smaller pieces of salvaged metal or granite stone can be hand gathered, while larger chunks of wreckage and granite rocks require a cut array to be mined. The most basic of cut arrays will do, but you will learn that higher tier resources require better and better tools. Tool upgrades are usually worth it though, as they generally also yield more resources per harvest. Another resource you can find pretty much anywhere are fuel cells. You'll need those to power the generators for your base and to craft vehicle fuel. Fuel cells can be found as individual, gatherable items across the map, and in the shape of larger cubes that can be mined with a cut array. By the way, smaller quantities of most resources can also be found in loot chests, so it's always worth scouring camps, caves or outposts for potential loot containers. Then there are of course dew flower fields that can be found all across the map, in some areas more sparsely than others. You will mainly use them to replenish your hydration levels in the beginning, but at a later stage you will also learn how to craft a scythe that allows you to harvest water from these plants and to refill portable water containers like the Litajon. While you can drink from these flowers at any time of day, the scythe can only be used at night, with the optimal dew yield being right before dawn. Like water, blood is another precious resource on Arrakis. Learning how to extract it from fallen enemies is part of your early journey that also teaches you how to convert blood to water. While you can drink blood, it should really be a last resort, as it reduces your overall health for a brief period. However, converting blood to water in larger quantities will be key for many crafting processes. The first type of ore that can be found as early as in Haga Basin South is copper. You can recognize copper by the streaks of blue color that marble the rocks. As with most ore, you can pick up small pieces by hand, but to properly farm copper you need a basic cut array. Make sure to mine a good amount of copper. You will need it to progress further north to the next part of the map, the Vermilius Gap. Now, before we move there, let's talk components. Components are crafting materials you primarily get as loot from enemies and loot containers. These can be items like gun and blade parts, armor plating and the likes. However, there are some components you can only get at specific points of interest. So let's have a look at the ones you'll be able to find and collect early on. Micro-sandwich fabric and EMF generators. These two components are related to areas of the Fremen, and most of the time you can find them in caves of any kind. Particle capacitors and advanced servox. Both components can typically be found in Imperial testing stations, also referred to as ecolabs. Mechanical parts and plasteel microflora fiber. These two components can primarily be found in the large shipwrecks, and in later zones also smaller crashed ships. Now that we have covered the most important resources from Haga Basin South, let's move to Vermilius Gap, the next early game zone. If you've made the crossing to Vermilius Gap, congrats! The real game begins right now, and it will get a lot more interesting when it comes to loot, resources and crafting. Vermilius Gap is divided into two zones, the eastern and western areas. One of the key resources you will find almost exclusively in Vermilius Gap is iron ore, and this is also the resource that's required to progress to the next tier of items. In order to mine iron ore, you will need a better cut array. If you completed the quest chain Scrap Metal from the trade post in Haga Basin South, you should have received a unique cut array as a quest reward. But alternatively, you can craft a Cutteray MK1 with copper ingots. Now, when it comes to iron ore locations, you should be able to find nodes more or less across the entirety of Vermilius Gap, mostly around rocky areas and mountains. What you should know is that resource locations aren't permanent in Dune Awakening, because the weekly Coriolis storm resets the spawn locations every week. By the way, it requires water to convert iron ore into ingots, so ramping up your water production is vital. At this stage, you will also want to craft your first personal shield, which will provide you with an extra layer of protection. And for this, you'll require Holtzman Actuators, another component. Holtzman Actuators can typically be found in loot chests in higher locations, around enemies that make use of shields and suspensor belts. Alternatively, you can also get them when dismantling crashed ornithopters. The next two resources that you can start gathering in Vermilius Gap are flour and spice sand. Both of these resources require you to go out on the sands in order to harvest them, which comes with a certain level of risk since you will attract the sandworm. You'll recognize fields of flour sand by the white-colored steamy patches on the sand. The purple patches of spice sand are linked to spice flows that occur randomly in various areas on open sand. So whenever you hear or see one, make sure to make your way there, as this resource is rather rare in Haga Basin. While both of these resources can technically be hand harvested, it's not really viable and it's recommended to use a static compactor instead, which can be unlocked by completing the second trial of Akkel. Now, as mentioned, there is a high level of risk when harvesting resources on the sands, so keeping an eye on the worm meter and working fast is essential. If you want to be on the safer side, try finding flour sand patches or spice fields that are closer to solid ground to minimize the risk. Later, once you get your first ornithopter, these tasks become a lot easier, although not risk-free. As with most resources in game, flour and spice sand can also be found in smaller quantities as loot, but you won't get around harvesting it yourself if you want to progress. And this wraps up our overview of essential resources in the starter and early game areas of Haga Basin. We hope this guide gives you a good idea of what's available and where to find it. Your next resource goal will be steel, but for that you need to advance further on the map. As always, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more content from us and want to support our channel, please consider giving us a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe or become a member of our channel.